Someplace where the sun never sets. A story written by Ned Chinedum Nwabunike. I still remember how Mama rejoiced greatly when you were born. It remains vivid in my memory. I remember our compound had elders who moved in and out with smiles on their faces as they congratulated Papa. They muttered prayers, saying the hair Mama bore would live longer and bear him grandchildren. I would not forget quickly too how the women laughed with Mama inside her hut. Their laughter sounded like ringing bells in an enclosed tunnel. I remember their faces as they beamed and radiated with so much happiness. It was during the time of the harvest, when corns were ready to be plucked and yam tubers were ready to be pulled out from darkness into a wholesome new light. That time, the Impi stream flowed gracefully along its pathway, unlike in the previous season when we heard the swish-swish sound of the flowing stream. It was 5 years ago, around this time, but rather than being happy for the bountiful harvest, we were scared for your life. Adaeze, go and call the priestess! Rush, quick! Mama shouted, pushing Adaeze out of the hut. I watched as she ran quickly, like a hen would when chased. I saw confusion written all over her face. Ogadimma, go to the kitchen, arrange the sticks and put some water in the kettle above the fire. Then rush to Agadibe's house and call your father. Tears sparkled in her eyes as I rushed. While I gathered the sticks in the backyard, I could still see you in my head, cringing like an earthworm that had been sprinkled with salt. The pupils in your eyes had vanished like the stars in the break of dawn. I kindled the dying coals and then grabbed the kettle. I could still hear Mama muttering prayers, calling on Achi to save her from whatsoever shame it was that her enemies had planned for her. I could still hear the rapid pound of my heart against my chest. When I filled the kettle with water from the blue drum next to the kitchen door, I tried to imagine what would happen to you. I asked too many questions in my mind all at once, and I prayed that you wouldn't die. I settled the kettle above the fire and started for the front yard, only to see Papa coming into the compound. Arinze, Papa, Arinze is dying. Mama sent me to call you. I cried, tugging at his faded blue shirt. Papa was alarmed. He dropped his walking stick and started quickly for Mama's hut. With tears escaping from my eyes, I picked up the walking stick and then tried to catch up with him. Inside the hut, Mama held you. You seemed calmer, unlike earlier when you kept shaking forcefully like you were struggling with someone we could not see. His seizure started again now. I sent Ada to call the priestess, she told Papa, who sat next to her on the bamboo bed. Papa touched your head. I am afraid, Mama said again, and this time she sobbed. I studied her. I saw the fear that gathered in her eyes as she narrowed them from your pale face to Papa's solemn gaze. She still held you in her arms and cradled you against her bosom. Afraid of what, Boo? Papa asked, taking you from her arms. Mama didn't want to let go of you, but she did. I don't want him to die. You were sleeping. We were all certain of that. I could still notice the rise and fall of your chest as you drew breath. I fear he might be an ogbanje, Mama murmured. Don't be ridiculous, woman, and don't call my son that, Papa responded with a scoff. You cringed into Papa as though you drew some kind of warmth from him, or maybe it was your response to being called an ogbanje. Look behind Arinze's left ear, Mama told him. Papa did as he was told and stared for a while. I wish I could go closer to Papa to catch a glimpse of the ear and know what was there. Until today, I have not seen that mark behind my son's ears. Bia, Ogadimma, have your brother injured himself at the back of his left ear before now? She asked, looking at me. I looked back at her and then shook my head. Mama asked me because she knew you were closer to me. You told me almost everything and told everyone that I was your best friend. You bonded more with me than you had with Ada, and everyone knew that too. Mama sniffled. She coughed and then looked at you again. She pressed her lips tightly to silence her sobs, but I knew she was crying inside. She wanted to be strong. You were her treasure, a precious one. You came years after I was born. I had already forced myself to live with the fact that there would be no one else after me. When Adaize returned with the priestess, Mama was the first to go out of the hut. Papa followed, still carrying you in his hands. "Drop him on the ground!" The priestess shouted immediately I came out from the hut. Papa obeyed. He moved backwards away from you like you were some kind of strange animal. I looked at the priestess. She looked familiar, but I couldn't even place where exactly I had seen her. I was certain it was at the town square or at some bush path. I had seen her, but I wasn't sure where. Her face, even though beautiful, was stern. The gods had blessed her with a fair skin that she had decorated with chalk. The white lines had been drawn at her neck, along her arms and on her feet. Her hair was in dread and was adorned with cowries and red beads. Her red regalia had patches of black and white clothes on it, and cowries too here and there. In her hand was a small wooden staff, and on her right side a small raffia bag hung from her shoulder. "You know what he is," she said, pointing to you. She glanced at Mama, and then Papa, and then she fixed her gaze on you. "He is an ogbanje. He would live only to die when he turns 6. He's an evil child, an ogbanje." If the priestess was no daughter of the gods, I would have flared at her for calling you evil. She even repeated that you were an ogbanje twice. You were not evil. You were just helpless, lying there on the ground like a rejected blessing. "Eziwanyi, what do we do?" Papa asked. Mama nodded quickly. Even though I didn't see her, but I could feel Adaize's eyes staring unwaveringly at me. "Prepare him for the sacrifice and rituals. You know better. Call him what he really is, and not the name you know him as. Bathe him with water from soaked oba leaves for 7 days, and on the 8th day, I'll take him to the shrine to appease the gods and perform the sacrifice." When she stopped talking, she sneezed. Your eyes blinked open and you began to cry. When we were done eating supper, I gave you my piece of meat. Not because I wanted to, but because I felt pity for you. "Why does everyone keep looking at me like that?" you asked. I tore my eyes from yours and fixed it on the empty plate in front of me. "Like how?" Adaize asked. "Drink water before you choke on the pepper." I heard a thin cough, but I ignored her. You scowled, and yet I didn't bother to look up at you. I didn't want to, because each time I did, I felt that pang of panic that one day you would die. I've heard series of stories about ogbanje children. They come and stay for a while and then they die. They keep coming to that same family and they keep dying, bringing nothing but sorrows and pains. Ogbanje children won't return to a family if they have been marked on their skin because they believe the family would recognize them. They rather go elsewhere where a family was desperately in need of a child and they start the cycle of death again. "Mma, tell me a story, please," you begged, touching my arm. Your hand was cold and it felt as though you transferred your evil to me. "Story? It's your turn today," I responded. You shrugged and then laughed. "Go and drop the plates in the kitchen and come tell me a story," I said without asking why you laughed. You picked up the plates and then went to the backyard. "Do you think we should call him an ogbanje?" I asked Adaize. She rubbed her arms and then glanced at me. "If it's the only way to make him live longer and ostracize the spirit, yes, we should call him that." I wondered what the other girls in my age grade would think when I call you that name. They would probably laugh at you and I wouldn't stand it. "I can't call him that," I responded. "You want our brother to die, eh? You remain arrogant and disobedient," she said in spite. I didn't ask you the question for you to insult me. I only asked for your opinion, not your conclusion, I snapped. Better go to the backyard and look for that ogbanje you sent there. You are the ogbanje, I retorted as I stood up and started for the backyard. She was older than I was. She was 19 or 20. I couldn't tell though. You sat on the low stool in the kitchen talking in a low tone. Even as I drew closer, I couldn't make out the words you were saying. When you turned to stare at me, I felt my heart jump into my throat. You sent them away now, you said, sadly with your eyes narrowing to me with anger in them. My heart began to beat faster against my chest, and my breathing intensified. Who? Who is them? I stuttered. Fear gripped me as I felt it crawling deeper into my skin. My friends, you sent away my friends, you shouted, making me flinch. But I'm your friend. It's me, Ma. I stammered. You were talking to yourself. I wasn't. They were here, my friends. Nobody was here. I didn't see anyone live here, I said, touching you. Maybe they've gone back. They didn't want you to see them. I didn't know which was stranger, having a brother as an ogbanje or having a brother who talks to spirits, even goes on to call them friends. Where did they go? Where are they from? I asked. I stopped to look into his face. The moon was kind enough to illuminate the night. I was still afraid, scared like a rat drenched with rain and having nowhere to hide. They said they are from some place where the sun never sets, where the leaves are blue and not green. They said that's where I belong and I would be happy there. Something stabbed me from within. I felt tears run down my cheeks. The sky pulsed and throbbed, evoking a low canopy, bejeweled and lit like a globe. It was like I could reach and extinguish the sun. I opened the pot which was above the fire. The vapor that escaped into the air almost scalded my face. It smelled of bitter rot. The water from the leaves is ready, Mama, I told Mama, who was plucking pumpkin from the stems that crawled over the walls and over 4 bamboo stakes that were fixed into the ground. Adaeze, call your brother, Mama said. Adaeze looked up from where she sat selecting beans which we were to cook for lunch. Mama, he's an ogbanje. That's what the priestess said we should call him, Adaeze blurted. Now I know why he doesn't like you. You don't even understand what he is passing through, I said in anger. I am not meant to understand evil. He came to bring us sorrow, to break our hearts in a million pieces when he passes on. And you think you've brought us any good? I said, this time allowing my eyes to spit fire. Such a peddling girl you are. You've never been to school yet you run your mouth. Why don't you shut it before I pounce on you, ignorant fool, she cursed. When they call people with power to fight, you show yourself. All you know to do is spit words. At the face of the fight, you are nothing but ice block, stiff and chill, I mocked her. Both of you should not get on my nerves, Mama shouted calmly. Adaeze, go and bring my son. Mama, he's an ogbanje, she muttered, stamping her legs on the ground as she dropped the tray that contained the beans. You are crazy, Adaeze, Mama fired, dropping the pumpkin leaves which were in her hands into a small bowl. Putrefying carcass of a rabid dog. May ants feed on your mouth. You want to talk back to me, eh? Unlovable human that looks like what a giant cat regurgitated. Let me hear one more stupid word from you concerning that boy. Then I'll tear you to pieces with my bare hands. I have never seen Mama so angry before. She was among the few women who was trained by the white men who came to the village years ago. But I never heard her use those words before. I understood why she acted that way, because Adaeze constantly reminded her that she bore an ogbanje. I knew you weren't one probably. You were just a baby who missed your way when you arrived in the family. We wanted you to stay with us for a long time before you leave. On the 4th day into the Oba rituals, your seizure started again. This time, you kept saying words like, I am coming, or wait for me. Mama carried you into the kitchen in panic, and I followed. "Mma, sit on that stool and hold this boy," she told me. I sat on the stool, and then I remembered the night when you sat there on that same stool, talking to your strange friends. Mama shoved you into my arms. You began to laugh in a strange way. "Mama, hurry up, I don't know why he's laughing," I asked, almost crying. Your hands began to stiffen as you cringed into my bosom. Take me, you muttered slowly. I looked at you, and when I tried to blink back my tears, they dropped on your face. I had never been so scared in my entire life. Mama kept searching the cupboard in the kitchen, opening and slamming them angrily. From the small shelf near the open window, she got out a small sack. She took a bowl from the basket of utensils. She then scanned the kitchen, narrowing her eyes from the scattered pots to the dying flame at the fireplace. It finally settled on the hard shell of a coconut, which served as a measuring cup. She picked it up and quickly measured the fine white powder in the sack. She reached the top shelf again. She knocked down a few cylinder bottles. The bottle containing grinded alligator pepper fell on the ground and smashed in pieces, but she didn't care. She took out from the top shelf a bottle that contained a black powder. She got out 2 other bottles that contained some spices and dried herbs. From the bottles, she took a pinch or 2 and sprinkled them into the bowl. With her hands, she mixed the content of the bowl quickly until the kitchen became a fine amalgam of aromas. She came to where I sat with you in my arms. She applied the mixture on your face, arms, and legs, cancelling in reverse the word you said. "You are not going anywhere. You are my child, and nobody will take you from me." Mama began to cry. Her hands shook as she applied the mixture on your body. You stopped talking and you smiled. I couldn't help but wonder why. I wanted to believe that you had probably gone to the place you told me about, the place where the sun never sets. Mama took you from my arms and sat on the ground next to me. I dried my eyes and looked away at the broken cylinder and the alligator pepper scattered near the basket of utensils. That evening, I watched you as you stood near the earthen pot at the backyard. You watched as Adaeze kindled the fire. She kept murmuring and cursing, making complaints about how tired she was from fanning the flames. "Arinze, come and sit down on this stool," I said. You probably didn't hear me because you didn't move. You seemed fascinated by the flames. Your gaze was lost to the glowing coals, and so was your mind. A fierce wind blew and disturbed the ashes and sand particles. Some of the dust particles found their way into my eyes. "Arinze, come blow out my eyes," I cried, beckoning on you. You were adamant, rooted to the spot and lost. "Ogbanje!" I had no idea why I had called you that, but I was glad I did, because you turned swiftly and settled your eyes on my face. I had shut the affected eye, trying too hard to endure the stinging pain. You came closer and held my chin. "Let me see." Slowly, I opened my eyes. Your voice was soothing and calmer. Later that night, I sat on the mat which I had brought to the center of the compound. You laid with your head placed on my laps and you ran your hands over my legs slowly. "I am sorry for calling you an ogbanje," I heard myself say in a muffled whisper. The air was damp. There was no wind, not even a tiny whoosh. "You don't have to be. Mama said I was one. An ogbanje." I pressed my lips together and then rubbed your head. "What happens at those times when it seemed like you want to die?" I asked. You remained calm, and for a while you didn't say anything. Unlike other times, I couldn't read you. I didn't know what you felt. I didn't know what you wanted to say. You stopped running your fingers on my legs and then sat up. Even though you didn't look at me, it still felt like you did. "They keep pulling me. They chant my name and would not stop. They keep saying I should get ready to come home." I felt a tingle, and then fear crept into me. Mama sat close to the hut. She was talking to Papa about something I had no idea of. "Who? Your spirit friends?" I asked. They keep asking me to come, you continued, ignoring my question. My saliva became a hard pebble that would not go down my throat. But you are not going yet, are you? The question was stupid, but I asked anyways. I could see your face in the dim moonlight, but you couldn't see mine because the shadows prevented you from seeing it. I am scared. I don't want to go. I love here. Your face was solemn. Adaize had told me that ogbanje spirits were crafty and pretentious. I didn't know if the look on your face was real or unreal. What about your home? The place where you said the sun shines forever. I caught the tears as it rolled down your left eye swiftly, and at that moment, my heart broke in two. When you looked at me, you sighed. Never let me go there alone. Please, Ma. Your voice broke. I felt thankful that you didn't see my tears through the shadows. I won't. I am strong, you know that. I knew I was lying. I had no power to fight spiritual beings. No, I never had that kind of courage. But then, I needed no spiritual being to tell me that we shared some kind of connection, you and I. Agodi was a pest, a loony fly that searches for the murkiest of rotten faces to perch on. Today was just that day I did what I had never dreamt to do. She called you a deserting ogbanje. I had kept my cool because Nkolika told me to ignore her and go stand with the other girls in the age grade meeting. The other part why I kept my cool was because fighting in the meeting could result to a possible eviction from the gathering or a fine. Yes, that was why I ignored. But when I heard her miserable laughter, I didn't care what I had to lose. I rushed to her and pounced on her. Where the vigor had spouted from, how the strength had gathered inside of me, I had no idea. Before the other girls could even pull me away from her, I had already let a cut along her cheekbone. Leave me alone, I said, pulling away from Ugoche, the thin black girl who held me. I straightened up and glanced at Agodi with hate in my eyes. She stood up quickly and made for me. The other girls kept shouting as she pushed me down. She rained punches and tore at my face. My precious face. Your brother is a demonic spirit. Evil, she kept muttering. I gathered a handful of sand and threw it at her eyes, and while she screamed in pain, I pushed her away. It was my turn again to sit on her. I clawed at her skin like a wild wolf that had no pity. Soon, she began to cry out for help, but I didn't mind. I made sure I fed her with enough sand before standing up, as that symbolized my victory. Call my brother an ogbanje one more time, bushfowl, I cursed, rolling my eyes in their sockets. When the leader of the age grade called for us, I moved swiftly to meet her. I knew I had beaten up someone, and I was wrong because fighting was against the rules, and it was something I should go own up to. The reason was because this time I was right. I did the right thing. I fought for you. I didn't mind whatever punishment I was to receive. I'd do it gladly. When I awoke the next morning, I ached in every bone and my head throbbed dully. Outside the hut, sunbeams broke through the clouds like the first bright rays after a storm. The hut was empty, and at first, I had no idea why Mama didn't wake me up earlier to go to the stream. She had massaged me at night with a hot towel after I told her about Agodi. She might have thought that I needed a rest. When I rolled up the mat, I heard Papa exchanging greetings with someone outside the hut. I leaned the rolled mat on the wall of the hut near a small bag that contained old clothes. Who is Papa talking to? I asked you when you came into the hut. You wore nothing apart from a dirty red pair of shorts. Mud coated your arms and legs, making you look like something that crawled out of a rock. You've been at the clay site again? I asked another question even though I was yet to get a reply for the previous. Yes, it's Agodi and her father. My mouth dropped open for half an instant before I recovered myself. Mma! I heard Papa's call soon enough. I waited for him to call again before I answered. When I did, I made my voice sound weak, like the pains fell heavily on me. I then staggered, limping on one leg with a faint strain. Mazi, good morning, I greeted Agodi's father, who sat on the bench next to Papa. He only studied me and then gave a scoff in place of a reply. I narrowed my eyes to Agodi and I nearly gave a hearty laugh. Her face was swollen. There was a darker patch under her eyes and finger marks ran in almost all directions on her face. Is it true that you fought with Agodi? Papa asked me. He never knew. Mama didn't tell him. Yes, Papa, I responded, looking at my feet. Why? The words Agodi said the previous day replayed in my head. She called Arinze and Ogbanje, I responded. Isn't that what he is? Agodi's father asked me. I wanted Papa to rebuff him for referring to his son as an ogbanje, but when I lifted my head, Papa's eyes were on me. They remained unwavering, as if he still expected an answer from me. No, I replied, raising my eyebrow. He's not an ogbanje. He's my brother. I tried to imagine what would have been if this whole ogbanje thing was not real. I wouldn't be standing there and Papa would not be staring at me like I committed a heinous crime. His gaze pierced into me, deeper into my soul, and for a moment, it intimidated me. I felt like those big eyes of his meant to say how disappointed he was in me. What's there to complain of? Mama asked, coming from the back of the hut. They are both girls in the same age grade. Can't you see that my daughter too was injured? Did you see my 2 legs in your compound? I looked at Agodi. I wanted her to see the glimmer in my eyes. My own warrior had arrived. Woman, this is no place for you, Agodi's father bellowed. And this is not your compound for you to give me that instruction. Your daughter is just as lazy as her mother. They are only gifted with mouths that brag hail and thunder. She thought it not wise to come here and show her ugly face, and indeed, she thought well. It's enough, Papa shouted. Mama scoffed. I looked away into the compound. Mama came beside me and stood there like a mighty Iroko tree. No, it's not enough. Papa Adeze, it's not enough, she cried. You sit here and listen to people who call your son names. People who come to mock you even in your own house, and all you could do is sit there like processed melon and do nothing. Mama's voice wounded my spirit. Leave our compound, I said to Agodi. I narrowed my eyes to her father. He shifted his eyes to Papa, who looked into space. So, women now control you, Bo Ikenna. You should go now. You've insulted me enough. I watched them. Father and daughter found their way out of the compound the same way they had come. You came out of the hut and leaned on the wall of the hut with a frown on your face. You looked like a small, weak animal. Your eyes were red and your face wet with your own tears. The sun was high in the sky, but it didn't shine with so much intensity like it did in the previous days. I sat with Mama and Adeze at the backyard. We talked about the wrestling competition, with our dad doing more of the talking and laughing. So, the pretty princess would be given as a wife to the winner? I asked again as though I never knew. Yes, it's the custom, and I'm sure Margot will win. He is a muscular giant. Besides, it's not as if the princess is beautiful, Adeze replied. In her laps was a bowl of dry black pepper. To be muscular or a giant isn't a criteria for winning. The competition is to test wits and craftiness. Wrestlers are to be tactical. That is more important than bodily build, Mama added. She bent over the fireplace, inspected the firewood, and then opened the pot which was above the fire. Vapors spiraled into the air and then disappeared out of sight. Just take it! Someone shouted in front of the yard. It sounded like you, that I was sure. Who is he talking to? Adeze asked. She didn't seem alarmed. None of us was until you laughed so hard. I have never heard you laugh that way before. The laughter was so real and contagious, but I only swallowed. Mama closed the pot quickly and started for the front of the yard. Adaeze followed, and so did I. Is there someone he sees that we don't? This is strange, Mama said in a whisper. I remembered again the night you were talking to your friends. We stood near the hut watching you laugh so heartily. He says they are his friend from some place where the sun never sets, I replied. Ha! Ogbanje, Ada murmured. It had to be Ogbanje land. Mama was surprised. Her mouth dropped open for a few seconds before she recovered herself. She then pressed her fist into her mouth to quench a silent sob as she began to race around the compound, chasing beings we could not see. Ogbanje! Adaeze called in fear. Who are you playing with? We all came out to meet you. You have never been so afraid, just like you have been when you saw us. I saw the fear in your eyes. The panic you bore was heavy, and that was when you slumped. They are pulling him, I cried as we rushed to you. My tears did not take caution before they spilled. What do you mean? Adaeze asked as Mama carried you in her laps. Weta Ngazi! Mama shouted, Get me a spoon! She cried again. Adaeze ran towards the direction of the kitchen. Ma, get those herbs from the kitchen, Mama said again. In the kitchen, I had almost bumped into Adaeze, who was racing out with the aluminium spoon in her hand. My own hands were shaky. I sobbed loudly, and I didn't mind the tears that spilled on my blouse. I picked up a brown bowl, gathered the herbs, and reached for the small sack that contained the white powder which Mama had used the other day. When I returned, I noticed that Mama had fixed the spoon in between your upper and lower teeth. You were still, but from the corners of your closed eyes, tears rolled out. He said during his seizures, his spirit struggles with his body. His spirit's friend keep calling him at the other side. I caught 2 tears as they slid down Adaeze's face. I thought they were fake. He must be strong, she muttered. I looked at you. In the deep sleep you had fallen into, your face still looked as though you were scared. He doesn't want to go back, I told her, so he keeps fighting. Adaeze broke down and cried louder. After a while, she ran into the hut and her cries intensified. I sat next to Mama on the ground, watching her mix the herbs. I fixed my gaze on you and I cried silently too, just like Mama. I thought Adaeze felt guilty. Her heart condemned her. She never knew all you had to struggle with. She had been distant and she never cared. I waited for Mama to be done applying the mixture before I leaned on her. She wrapped her arm around me and held me close, just like she held you. It was the final day of the Oba ritual. I followed Ada to the Eke market to buy the Oba leaves. While we walked home, we stopped to pluck udala fruits at Mazi Nzube's compound. The udala tree stretched dozens of its long branches over the tall bamboo fence, so we didn't need to go into the compound to pluck the fruit. I gathered a few bigger ones for you to congratulate you with them after the final ritual. The sun's slanted beams sifted through treetops as it set in the sky. Do you think the priestess will ostracize the ogbanje spirit? I asked Adaeze as we turned along the sharp bend on the pathway. Yes, Papa said the priestess of Akambe is powerful. She communicates with spirits and has cured many ailments in time past. She is mean and never smiles. I hope she helps Arinze. I don't know what would happen if he dies. If you died, many things were bound to happen. Mama would cry like she had lost everything. Papa would lose his Okoko title, which required its holder to have a male heir. And we would all go back to how it was before you came. You've brought so much happiness to the family, and when you leave, you take it with you. I wanted to imagine you as a selfish young boy, but the truth was, whatever you did, you had no choice. Don't think like that. He's not dying. His seizures would stop after the final Oba ritual. Then, the priestess would come for him. She would do the remaining ritual at the Akambe shrine and offer the required sacrifice. I watched her bite into an udala fruit. My gaze followed the bright orange juice that spilled and rolled down her wrist. She licked the juice that rolled down the wrist with her tongue and began to suck the fruit again. Do you have any idea how long he would stay with her? I asked. Who? Arinze? Maybe a day or two. We should be grateful to the gods that the seizure started early. If it had been in the year he was supposed to die, it would have been a battle, a very tough one. How come you know so much? I asked. Adaize had been answering questions with ease, even though I knew her to have a dull brain. She opened her mouth to give a reply, but then she closed it again. She said nothing until we arrived home. After bathing you with the Oba water that night, we all sat in the hut watching as Mama added the other herbs into the remaining Oba water into the pot. I could still see some Oba leaves floating like dead fishes above the greenish water. You looked happy, but I still couldn't tell what the smile on your face meant. Papa stared on as Mama's hand worked with dexterity, mixing the herbs. Finally, she used a big wooden spoon to turn the liquid. Heavy steams escaped quickly like they had been set free from a gruesome bondage. Nna, come closer, Mama told you. I saw how reluctant you were. The look in your face disappeared and it seemed like you would cry. You moved to sit in front of the pot anyway. Mama covered you with one of her old wrappers. Slowly, you bowed, breathing in the steams from the pot, allowing it to enter through every opening in your body. Mama pulled the wrapper over your head. That way, she trapped the steam from escaping. When the ritual was done, I handed you 2 big udala fruits, but you said you were too weak to eat them. You went to the corner of the hut and there you slept. It was not up to an hour you slept that we heard the chant of the priestess from a distance. I first pictured her to be around the wide junction that led to the pathway that narrowed to the compound. I also pictured her to be in a red flowing gown, looking angry with her eyes widened and her gaze stiff. Is that the priestess? Adaize asked Mama. Mama gave a timid nod and then narrowed her eyes to you. She shouldn't be here too soon, or should she? No one was answering. No one wanted to talk. Mama stood up and walked to the door of the hut. She leaned into the wall. For the first time, I noticed how thin Mama had become. I glanced at Adaize. She looked away from my gaze. She's here, Mama said, adjusting at the entrance of the hut. I could still hear the chants that intensified and dropped at intervals. When I heard the tiny squeak of the bamboo fence, I knew she had entered the compound. Mama moved away from the entrance to allow the priestess come into the hut. The priestess entered with her back, muttering stranger incantations. I was right when I had imagined her to be angry, but instead of a red gown, she wore a white gown that had mirrors on them. I came for the ogbanje. Her voice was firm. Her eyes widened like they would pop out of their sockets. We finished the last. I know, she supplied before Papa finished. I watched her. She seemed unaware of other things, like the kerosene lantern in front of her, and she didn't fail to knock it down. She didn't even care. She only moved to where you laid and scooped you up. Cold, hard emptiness filled the hut after the priestess had taken you. We heard her loud chants as she offered Lord to Akambe. Her voice died down gradually until we heard it no more. What happens to him now? I asked Adaize in a muffled whisper. She looked at Mama. I did too, but her gaze was already fixed on me. Her stare showed grief. It also showed anger. I ran my mind through all the things that could have made her look at me angrily like that. Chores? No, it was something else. Mama, what's wrong? I asked. Covering her face with her hands, she gave way to a frustrated sob. What did I do? I asked. My face was already wet and the hut had turned hot. I felt lost, like I was not supposed to be there. I was certain that they were not telling me something. When night fell, the second day after the priestess had taken you, no one had spoken to me. The night seemed long, and while I stood outside hoping to catch a breeze, I caught nothing. I decided that whatever the other members of my family were keeping from me was their business. From time to time, I sneaked and eavesdropped, trying to listen to their muffled conversation, but I heard nothing. I didn't know how you'd feel when you woke up in a shrine rather than the hut where you had known all your life. I stood outside for what seemed like an hour. The silence was heavy, like all the night insects and animals were done with their chores and were resting. I slapped my shoulders, killing a mosquito that had perched there. Slowly and carefully, I walked to the bamboo gate. I looked back at the hut. Then I went out into the darkness. The wind soon began to blow gently, arousing the beautiful and calm whistling of leaves and grasses. I knew the way to Akambe Shrine. There were a few things I had really never imagined that I would do in my life, like walking to a shrine that was 5 miles away without a companion. I didn't know why I was going to the shrine. Maybe it was because the bond grew stronger now. In my head, I saw you lying on an altar and the priestess kept chanting like she was possessed by a legion of spirits. My low pants as I walked through the bushy path were the only sound I could hear, and it startled me. When you were 4 years old, we would break palm kernels every Saturday near the bamboo fence. We would laugh each time we saw 2 ackee seeds enclosed inside a palm kernel. You would tell me how you wished we were twins. You also acted like you knew too much, the same way Adaeze had been acting in the past few days. You'd stare at the palm fruit for too long and then go on to say that I was one and you were the other. I tried to imagine you in the shrine, bundled like a sacrifice for the gods because you were an ogbanje. When I approached the shrine, I saw the faint orange light that poorly illuminated the darkness. I couldn't tell what type of light it was, but I knew that I felt a kind of warmth as I moved closer towards the smoldering light. Ogadimma! I heard the priestess shout my name like I had stolen from her. Fear fell on me with a thud. It stifled through my skin, sinking deep into my bone marrows. It consumed me in a flash, like a small piece of paper set on fire. I wanted to run away, but as though she sensed it, she shouted again, "Don't make a move! I am the daughter of a tiger. I would tear you to shreds even at the spot where you stand." Her voice was shrill. At that moment, I had no idea whatsoever it was that had triggered my intention to go to the shrine. I went into the open compound. There were several Nkwanaka lamps that had a flicker of flame, but I could count only 6. The priestess stood in front of a hut which I presumed to be where she slept. She wore a red flowing gown that had black smears all over it. The sight of the big Akambe idol snatched my breath for an instant and made my legs weak. The priestess motioned me to where she stood with her eyes widened. I could see the holiness of her nose. Cringing inwardly, I stifled the urge to run away. "Why did you come here?" she asked. Her eyes rested unflinchingly on my face. I looked away, waiting for her to ask another question. One I could easily answer. I wanted her to ignore me. When I looked back at her, I caught her still watching me with a question slant on her brow. The world seemed to pause for a moment before I spoke up. "I didn't want to leave my brother alone all by himself." She smiled at me. It felt unusual, but it was simple and she looked pretty. I wanted to tell her that she looked more beautiful when she smiled, but then she frowned and placed out her hand. "You must be tired," she told me. Reluctantly, I placed my hand in hers, even though I never wanted to. I was tired and I was glad she knew. "Let's go to the backyard." At the backyard, she plucked some leaves from a small shrub at a corner. "Make the fire, can you?" she asked me. I nodded and started for the fireplace. I don't know why no one wants to talk to me back at Papa's hut. I started as I stooped down to gather the ashes at the fireplace in a small flat tray. I rearranged the sticks and put in some dried leaves. Your parents have suffered a lot, I heard her say. It wasn't new because Mama told me of her sufferings all the time. I lit the fire and waited for it to spread from the dried leaves to the dry stalk underneath. A brief flicker grew into a glow, then a gleaming orange and yellow light. Acrid smoke choked me and I coughed. Sorry, she murmured. For a while, I thought of you. I thought you had been the reason for Mama's suffering. After all, you fell sick all the time. But isn't everyone bound to suffer at one point in their life? I asked. I wondered if I sounded intelligent to her, the same way Adaize did whenever she spoke of ogbanje children. Not everyone is bound to suffer the same way your mama did, she said. She coughed too and then waved off the smoke that hovered before her. You were the first ogbanje your mother bore that survived. My two legs all of a sudden felt numb, and a strange feeling settled on me like somehow I was watching myself from a mile away. I didn't know what to make of the words, even though I heard clearly what she had said. In that instant, it wasn't you that bothered me. It was me that bothered me. Isigini, my voice was faint, weak, but I knew what I had said, even though I felt deaf and couldn't hear myself. 2 other children died before you. They were ages 4 and 2. Liquid pools formed in my eyes. Little wonder Adaize knew so much. She came towards me with a small pot in her hands and placed it above the fire. She touched my shoulder and rubbed it lightly. No one told me. My voice broke and the tears spilled. It was a big burden. Who wants to speak of their misfortune? Your father nearly hung himself. Both children were boys. So, I was an ogbanje child? That is why your bond with Arinze is deep. But no one spoke of it. Why? I asked again. She ignored me for a while and went into the hut. She came out with a small calabash and kept it on a small stool. Because you were too young to understand. Like I said, you share a deep bond with your brother. I was confused and I let it show. I was tormented by my own fears and the dark cloud had settled over my spirit. But how? How do you mean? She shuddered. She turned her back to me for a while. She remained vague and unresponsive that I thought she was probably angry with me. She then turned to me and began to mutter a silent incantation. I heard nothing, only her lips moved. We need to first break the bond before we can save your brother. His Iyuwa can't be found. Not when your soul is tied to his. I watched her deep brown eyes as they searched my face before they settled on my hands. What happens after the bond is broken? Will he hate me? When the bond between two spirits is broken, they are separated. You bonded with the ogbanje, not the boy. I wish she could speak in words I could understand. I wanted her to tell me what exactly was going on, but here she was, dragging me like a goat on a leash around the thick forest. When the bond is broken, the ogbanje would be gone, forever. Would you do it for your brother? I knew the implications. The moon, which seemed sympathetic, drew a cloudy handkerchief across its face, darkening the night, hiding my tears. I loved you, and I wasn't selfish, but then I wished for the second time that you remained an ogbanje. The faint light of day glimmered through the window, making vague patterns of the wall and the floors of the hut. I rubbed my eyes and then sat up. My stomach churned and my head ached. I looked around the priestess' hut. She was not there. Mama would probably be worried sick, but then it wasn't my fault. No one was talking to me, or maybe it was my fault. I was the ogbanje that brought another ogbanje spirit to the family. I had not seen you since the previous night, and I wondered what the priestess had done with you. I ached to put my hands around you once more, to see you smile, to hear you laugh. A lump rose to my throat and then it choked me. I nestled my face in my palms and sobbed. "Child?" I heard the priestess call. She touched my shoulder at the same spot she had touched the previous night. "I am not your child," I cried. "Where is my brother?" "Are you ready to break the bond?" she asked me. "I want to go home." I stood up and started for the door. "Your parents know you are here. Until you accept to break the bond, you can't go home." "Just save my brother," I cried. "Just save him, like you saved me." "There was no bond to break with you. This soul tie with your brother makes it complex. I haven't seen this in all my life." All of a sudden, like it even mattered, I wondered how old she was. "Are you ready?" "Where is he?" I asked after a scoff. She girded her apparel and then went out the hut. I followed her. There was a small building behind the Akambe shrine, and there I saw you. You stood up when you saw me, looking with eyes of plea. "Don't touch him. Let's break the bond," the priestess whispered. When you saw that I didn't move towards you, your face fell, and I saw the disappointment. I wanted to hug you tight. I wanted to promise you that you would be fine and you would get to live longer. Tears spilled over, one by one, and they slid shining down your brown cheeks. The priestess gave a shout that jolted me. She began to chant loudly, speaking strange things. She waved her small staff in the air and a smile drew along her lips. She kept chanting and went on for minutes. When she stopped, she looked at me. "Release him from your soul." I wondered how she wanted me to do that. "You were not my prisoner. You were my brother. How?" She started chanting again. Soon she began to move in a rhythmic dance step with her hand pointing the small staff to the sky. I felt a tug from within, like a push. It felt like something possessed me. I heard my screams as it pierced the calm silence of the morning. Something else moved me to the wall, and I cringed into it. My chest ached. So did my head. The priestess was still chanting loudly. I heard you calling my name. You said I was your friend. My head spiraled, and then your loud shout slapped against my eardrums. I covered my ears with both hands. I wanted it to stop. I prayed for it to stop. I didn't know if it was you or the priestess, but I felt like I was dying. I fell to the ground and laid on my side. I saw you standing there, crying. My gasps were thin. Weak tears dripped from corners of my eyes and dropped to the ground. When I closed my eyes, I opened them somewhere else, where the sun never sets. Spindling trees cast long, spiky shadows around me. I loved the tranquil atmosphere in the quiet minutes that preceded dark. "Mma," I heard my name from behind me. I turned. I saw you there with a group of other children. "You've grown pretty," one of the children told me. I looked at him and then narrowed my eyes to you. "What's this? What's this place?" I asked, looking around the pathway that had blue leaves in place of green. "You are home," the girls chorused. "Why are you all wearing sackcloth? And what is those strange white markings around your skin?" "They are the markings of the spirits," the tallest boy said. I let the fear drown me. "Oh my, what's happening to me? Arinze, come with me. Let's go home. This instant." "It's Ogogo. My name is Ogogo." I stared at you for a while, waiting to slap sense into your dull brains. "Ogogo, what was that? What is this place? Where is this stupid priestess of Akambe?" I cried out in panic. "You are home," the two girls chorused again. "Some place where the sun..." My horror was visibly etched on my face as I completed a sentence. "Never sets." I looked around the place again. I could still feel the cool breeze. "What am I doing here?" I asked again. "We are the children of the spirit world." No, I have a family. They are waiting for me," I said in fright. "You are my sister," the Ogogo version of you said. "I know. Even here in this home." That was when I remembered the bond I had to break. Spirits don't relate. I must be dreaming. My eyes settled on the spiral lines that were on your chest. "We are two spirit twins." The priestess' voice whispered in my ears. "Let's break this bond." "Come, let's go," you said, coming forward and stretching your hand to me. I moved backwards. "Don't touch him. Let's break this bond." The thrilled feminine voice whispered again. "I don't want to be your sister. I don't want to be bonded with you." Ogogo, or whoever he was, smiled and then he frowned. "What would Arinze think of you?" he asked, as though he meant to spite me. "I am doing this for him. You are a spirit. He is human. You are Ogogo or whatever it is you are, and he is Arinze. So he would understand that I want him to stay alive and live for a long time after he turns 7. Ogogo laughed and I could almost smell his deception. "You should come with me," he said again. Different thoughts filtered through my mind as I stared at him. "No," I responded again. This time, I sounded more fierce than before. "I want Arinze to leave." My legs wobbled and I fell. I opened my eyes to the sun sliding beneath a billowing gray cloud. From the corners of my eyes, I looked at you. I noticed how the last rays of sunlight made your skin gleam like bronze. "You've awoken," you murmured, like you were tired. I ignored you and looked around for the priestess. "Where is the priestess of Akambe?" I asked without looking at you still. I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. My throat felt dry and my legs were weak. I felt hungry. "I am sorry," I murmured. "It's okay," you responded. I had no reason why I apologized, but I still felt guilty about the bond and rejecting you in that place of spirits. Outside, we found the priestess sitting on a small stool in front of the Akambe idol. "I am amazed by your quiet strength. I never knew you would break the bond." "You never believed I would break it," I corrected. She smiled. "You never told me that breaking the bond would require me to fall into a deep sleep and wake up feeling dry. You left me there," I blurted. She didn't respond. She only picked up some cowries from the calabash in front of her. She threw them to the ground and studied them. "We have to find his Iyuwa," she said. I looked at you. Something seemed strange, but I could not fathom what it was. I took your hand and looked at the priestess. She began to chant loudly. She stood up, marched to the middle of the compound with her bag already slung over her shoulder and her staff in hand. "Show me where you hid it," she demanded, glaring at you. "Take me there." Slowly, you left me and began to walk towards the entrance of the compound. The priestess followed swiftly behind you without looking my way. I heard the rumblings of my stomach, but at this moment, it did not matter. You took us down the path that led to the river and we kept walking even as the sun disappeared from the sky. Finally, we arrived in front of our compound. You could have just brought us here straight away. Why take us round the whole village through the river? I asked you in perspiration. "Spirit things are not understandable to mere men," the priestess told me. Papa was scrubbing something off the mud walls. "Get a shovel!" the priestess shouted, alerting him of our presence. He jumped and then did as he was commanded. Mama came out from the hut. Adaeze followed behind her, holding an umpanaka lamp, whose flickering flame she shielded from the wind. She came to meet me. "Kedu?" she asked, smiling at me. "Odumma, I am fine." She could tell that I was hungry, but she didn't say. We both looked at you. You stood at the same corner behind the bamboo fence where we stayed to crack palm nuts. Papa arrived with a shovel and the priestess began to chant again. She collected the tool from Papa. My gaze narrowed from you to the stretched out shadow of yours that had cast along the bamboo fence. You looked thin, frail and weak, like a dry log of wood. The priestess moved to the spot where you stood and began to dig. I could see the tears as they escaped from your eyes. I could hear your thin sobs. I saw the rise and fall of your shoulders as you cried. Something pricked inside of me. I had betrayed you. I didn't know how that was possible, but I was sure that was the truth. That was the exact same spot your pebble was dug up from, Adaeze told me. Maybe that's why we are close to each other, I said as I gripped the hem of my blouse. The Iyuwa is close. I can feel it, we heard the priestess, chanting her incantations faster. I saw the joy on Mama's face. When she caught my stare, she smiled at me. I looked at the priestess, who picked up the small round pebble in her hand and held it up for us to see, even though we couldn't see it clearly in the darkness. Mama rushed to you and clasped you in her bosom. I felt the happiness too. Your son will live for you, I heard the priestess tell Papa. She handed him the shovel and her chant rose again as she walked out of the compound. Mama's black cock crowed loudly again. You raced around the compound chasing the cock and laughing heartily. I knew everything was all right. You had not been sick for almost a full year and there had been no seizures. You had forgotten everything, the same way I had forgotten everything when the priestess ostracized the ogbanje spirit from me. But I remembered everything about yours. Our sorrowful tears had been quenched and life and joy restored. You looked happy, and if there was indeed a place where the sun never set, it was here, just here. The end. Ogbanje, a child who dies to live again, possessed with an evil spirit and plaguing a family with misfortune. This book was brought to you by Mixie Fun Books. Thank you for listening to this book. Do well to drop a review on our website. For more audiobooks, visit www.mixiefunbooks.com.